Thanks for coming. We're very excited. I'm Sarah, Lehrer-Graiwer, and Pep Talk is my publishing project, and very, very excited to have this Rhonda Lieberman reader in the world and to have Rhonda here. We've been working on it for a couple years, and it's something that a lot of people have been anticipating very excitedly. So tonight, four of us are going to read short passages. I'm going to read something. Rhonda will read something last. Todd Meyers, who is here, who is one of Rhonda's former students, came from Shanghai to be here. He's going to read something. Bruce Hainley is going to read something, who's also contributed to the book and who is the instigator of the entire book itself. So we are very indebted to him for this existing. And I also wanted to thank Lauren Mackler as the book designer. It was so great working together, and it looks wonderful. And of course, thank Leah and Ethan and Mission and Ooga Booga, and everyone here is the best. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is a big book, and it includes over 82 reviews and essays and columns and talks. The earliest one is from 1988, and the most recent, well, there's a recent text that Rhonda wrote for the book, but the collected texts go up to 2016. So I'm going to read the first line because she has such good writerly hooks. I'm going to read the first line of a bunch of pieces, and then the first couple paragraphs of the last piece that I begin. Okay, so these are just some first lines. I was angry at my shrink, finally, after 7 years, for suggesting that I'd sabotage myself by not writing this column, and then blame her. Rich as hell, but old and alone, Coco Chanel spent her final years at the Ritz, wheezing, increasingly cranky, and sensitized to other people's odors. When she got really old, she wouldn't die. As my grueling quest for fabulosity staggers on well past my early 20-something period, becoming increasingly graceless and patient, I can leave no stone unturned. What do you have to do in a former life to come back as the sibling of a megastar? Montaigne observed that you can never win when you talk about yourself. If you say good things, people hate you, and if you say bad, they believe you. This didn't stop him, though, from using himself as a guinea pig in all his essays. She-Devils the movie has been strangely underestimated as a seminal political text, not only about fatty empowerment, but about the relation between art and life itself. She-Devils the movie from 1989. In the century of Calvin Klein, Ralph Lauren, and Dinah Shore, need we ask who but a Jew is best at packaging unwhiney blonde fantasy figures? Okay. It's a quote, "You are my pupil and I your teacher, but that is only the occasion for what has happened to us," end quote. Hannah Arendt's hot affair with Martin Heidegger ignited after hours one day at Marburg U in 1925. Okay. Any nerd semi-familiar with Nietzsche knows his sister was horrid. So good. Don't call them yentas, they're saloniers. In the days of yore, before the first Jap communed with a pair of Blahniks in the sanctum sanctorum of Bergdorf, Jews appreciated the metaphysical subtleties and theological niceties of footwear. For anyone who still harbors fantasies about the proverbial cushy job in the ivory tower, lifted and separated from the pitiless struggle for lucre and dedicated to the propagation of fine ideas, have I got a book for you. Known to posterity as a super-sensitive freak who withdrew to his stuffy, cork-lined room to spin gossip, reverie, and insomnia into the greatest novel of the 20th century, after throwing a goodbye dinner at the Ritz, partly to show he still had his marbles, Proust only seemed to retire from society. Walter Benjamin said it's the winners whose histories are told, but Todd Solondz's latest film proves it's the losers. Before Marcel Proust began the search, he slavishly devoted himself, with the help of his mother, to the translation of Ruskin's art historical writings, even though his spoken English was not good enough to order chops in a pub. You know the Pope loves to do crossword puzzles. He's sitting there doing one and asks a cardinal nearby, "What's a four-letter word for a woman ending in U-N-T?" Triumphantly, the cardinal says, "Ant." The Pope says, "Oh, right, do you have an eraser?" This is a fucking cool-ass show. In the center of the gallery sit Lander's sculptures wrapped in rags and plastic, looking pathetic and expectant. I'm convinced that Jeff Koons came out of the same petri dish as those helmet-haired guys on late-night infomercials who tell you can fully self-actualize yourself financially and spiritually by buying their tapes. Andy Warhol is to photography as Shakespeare is to words, Freud is to cigars, and Lagerfeld fans. Okay, we'll end with this. Friends, my name is R, and I'm a recovering theoraholic. There, I've said it. Most people can peruse a volume of Foucault every now and again with no real effects on their lives, discussing power casually with friends, mentioning disciplinary regimes, perhaps when out socializing to impress a colleague, but not going in too deeply. Everyone has seen the pathetic spectacle of the mess who forgets himself at a party and launches into the full-blown peroration about the fallacies underlying identity politics in public and has to be shown the door. Since that has never happened to me, I kidded myself that everything was okay. But theory is sneaky. My habits spun out of control. I had started using at an Ivy League graduate program. At first, I didn't think I had a problem, casually explaining film theory to undergraduates from good homes, but I was on a slippery slope. Soon I was discussing Slavoj Žižek openly on the streets of New York City. I hit bottom when I found myself on a panel at the Drawing Center shamelessly explicating the increasing incomprehensibility of art criticism with a bunch of museum professionals where, for the last time, I functioned as a native informer. I took a good look in the mirror. I had cleared my place of paraphernalia, purging the bathroom of October magazines, digging out the bootleg Xeroxes of not yet published Lacan seminars from my special place under the bed. I had been clean for several months when I was walking down the street, minding my own business, on my way to rent a film from Blockbuster, in fact, when a bunch of Swedes pulled up in a late model Saab and tempted me with a scintillating discussion of Gerhard Richter. I took the bait. I felt the familiar, irresistible rush you can only get when someone makes a really stupid point you could definitely refute. My pulse quickened. I chased the dragon. The drive to be a big know-it-all swiftly squelched the will to reform that grew inside me, but was yet a sapling in need of tender nourishment and support. Before I passed out, I saw the Swedes give each other the high five. It was sick and wrong. Next thing I knew, I woke up at a rogue art commune near the Arctic Circle with a bunch of airplane-sized Absolute Courant bottles rolling around in my purse. Some twisted wag had tucked the portable Nietzsche among my toiletries. I felt a familiar hankering to solve a textual problem, something about the translation. I disgusted myself. Okay. All right. Who's going to go? Okay, Bruce is going to read next.
Okay. Growing up in Fantasia, which was delivered at Naked Lunch, New York in 1992. Regarding women, the operative adjectives for my mother were attractive and, less frequently, stunning. They were the two lump categories, the second rarer. A stunning girl could refer to anyone, I would say up to 50-ish. Over 50-ish would be still stunning. Attractive would always invoke, first, someone who was slim, with big, high-maintenance hair, not too short, which would be too avant-garde, and would confuse my mother, so the person would fall out of the attractive or stunning categories into the black hole of indescribability. Whatever challenged my mother's implicit code of reality would fall through the cracks and be rendered nameless. Borderline cases would be referred to as different. Cases, however, that were really different, that is, not suburban and jappy in a typical way, would become instead, no matter how good looking, confusing. Even cute for a mature girl was somehow suspect, i.e. confusing, except for Kathy in the beauty parlor, who will be discussed later. An attractive girl evokes ribbed turtleneck, circa 1970, wool-belled slacks with zip-up ladies' boots, false eyelashes during the day, and a conspicuous costume jewelry neckpiece, something unique. A stunning version was that plus frosted hair. Of course, they had to be slim, that is, not to have a weight problem. The important thing was to look done, made up, accessorized, with hair that one didn't wash oneself. I don't remember my mother ever washing her hair, unless she was going to the beauty parlor. I didn't think moms washed their own hair. Not getting the hair wet was a very mom thing. And I remember my mom doing the side stroke in the pool, just a few laps when it was very hot, wearing one of those bulbous kerchiefs, her head blossoming with nylon chiffon petals, as she would scream at my brothers to stop splashing. Enough already with the splashing. Riding in what seemed like endless carpools to Hebrew school, I remembered some of the moms who looked like they washed their own hair because they were hipper, more intellectual, or lazier. They were moms who had long hair, like kids, and I thought this was so cool. Intimations of a parallel universe. I vowed I'd be one of them. I promised myself that I would be a mom with long hair who listened to rock music on the radio during the carpool instead of easy listening. Or if you were lucky, Dionne Warwick. Later in high school, I remember trying to explain to my mom why Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin was singing as opposed to screaming. As a youngster, I spent a great deal of time in the beauty parlor, waiting for my mom, who had a big beauty parlor habit. First, La Scala, which I was too small to remember as anything but the name. After the Great Opera House, which I learned only years later as a junior abroad, first having encountered the name to designate the strip mall beauty parlor, souped-up Italian suburban Baroque with lots of scallop molding. Later, Al and Mike, a couple, broke away from the notorious Vinny, owner of La Scala, known to have affairs with clients, to form the splinter salon Fantasia. They had quite a following. Fantasia, too, was decorated in high Italian 70s suburban Baroque, apparently the decorative conditions most favorable for developing that particular strain of Jewish suburban beauty in its fullest flower, with scalloped molding, amoeboid tile forming an island in the carpeted reception area, sweeping from the door to the cashier display case, which accented unique costume jewelry that no one ever seemed to consider buying. The whole place seemed rather dark, the Italianate glam references unpleasantly traversed by the 70s earthy thing as it manifested in dark paneling, which set off the avocado and gold color scheme in a most unpleasant way, resulting in an unintended dungeon-like effect. I would amuse myself playing with the different color and size rollers. On wheeled receptacles convenient for sliding from operator chair to operator chair. I was probably driving those queens crazy. This was a beauty parlor with rows of hair dryers, seating rows of moms with magazines, and insanely bored, meandering children. It always seemed to be crowded. Knowing my mom, she probably liked going during the popular times, just as in a new restaurant, she would ask the waiter what was the most popular dish and order it, determined even unto her palate to regulate her taste with the opinion of others, thus making for the least confusion. Waiting for Mom underneath the hairdryer was the longest, most boring part. Sun lamps were just coming in for the natural layered look, but most of the heavy-duty moms preferred the set combed out and spray, the hairdo like a huge hairy halo, quasi-spiritual armor to stave off and protect those Jewish Madonnas from the new confusing variables like blow dryers, which threatened to mutate their world irreversibly and change the rules they are still trying to get right. I always remember Michael as another kind of lady. I think he teased and used a little spray. He was always friendly, with a pert, round butt that stuck out of his designer jeans. He was great with my mom, who was the soul of a drag queen. Al was always a bit more gruff and butch. He handled the phone, wore an open shirt, hairy chest, Italian horn. He had no butt. Their couplehood made perfect sense as couplehood, as we were used to seeing it in the suburbs. No one said a thing about it.
I honestly believe I was probably Rhonda's worst student during her time at the Art Institute of Chicago, and ever since I've been trying to do better. So I have a lot to thank Rhonda for. I'm going to read the beginning of one essay and the very end of another. The essay that I'm going to begin with is The Loser Thing, which was published in Art Forum in September of 1992. And I have a copy of this essay at home from the John M. Flaxman Library at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which has all of these notations in the margins. And I would underline things like aesthetic value, or circle Ruskin. What's that about? So when I read it now, it's dense in a different way for me. Anyways, I'll just leave it there. So, The Loser Thing. Before Marcel Proust began the search, he slavishly devoted himself, with the help of his mother, to the translation of Ruskin's art historical writings, even though his spoken English was not good enough to order chops in a pub. He worshipped Ruskin as the arbiter of aesthetic value, and even made slavish pilgrimages to the sites in Europe where Ruskin wrote about Gothic architecture. He wanted to drink in the spirit incarnate about which Ruskin wrote so compellingly, to pay a personal visit to those small figures carved by anonymous medievals on church surfaces, to see how they embodied the eternal fine points about salvation and oblivion. Sadly, he was disappointed with what he found and eventually blew off Ruskin as a fetishist. Nietzsche's apprenticeship to Wagner was also abject, if ultimately effective. He misrecognized his own genius as his mentors, projecting onto him the dynamic role of Dionysus that he later took for himself, perhaps at the cost of a definitive psychotic episode, his final 11-year-long twilight stint of catatonia. As a sassy young philologist, he fashioned onto Wagner as a father's substitute and eventual rival, abjectly devoting himself to being the Wagner's house guest, worrying whether they liked his dress coat, and even having a total crush on Wagner's fabulous wife. Eventually, Nietzsche refuted Wagner, dumping him and everything he stood for, and became his own god, or rather, Antichrist. Under the laws of narcissism or ego development, the only thing to do with the lost object is to kill it, eat it, become it. Samuel Beckett had such admiration for James Joyce, who was vain about his small feet, that he literally tried to walk in the master's footsteps by buying the same size shoes. He had to stop because his feet hurt. Apprenticeship is a constitutionally abject activity. You want to be the special stuff you admire in your hero, while implicitly cutting yourself off from it as long as you want to be it. Special stuff is a real imaginary appendage that is produced and circulated as long as everyone believes that other people have it. A fan is, by nature, split off from this organ of real imaginary plenitude. The glamour industry institutionalizes the lack in being when it swerves back and attacks you with accusations that you're not someone else. As a comic genius in the classical sense, Andy Warhol transvalued lack into happy, profitable outcomes, using the real market fetish magic of art to turn wannabes into instant superstars with the right institutional backing. He was one of the first artists to embrace affirmatively the wannabe moment as the generative power of the work, lucidly noting that he was so jealous of his left hand envied his right, and when the left side of his mouth had candy, the other side felt deprived. According to Maurice Blanchot, art's truth is always vindicated retrospectively by future work. We can see Warhol's origin in the rich flowering of abjection in the art world today, the excess poverty, with each new move seeming more and more as if it is slighter and somehow cheating. While no one is making masterpieces anymore, no one is really trying to make them either. Abjection means to cast off, existing in or resigned to a low state dumped by yourself, as you psychotically misrecognize yourself and ideals. To counteract this condition, you can ferret through the biographies and letters of famous people, remembering not their noble moments, which are to be expected, but petty chinks in the character that one can truly share. By bonding with them in moments of smallness, one experiences strange, sublime relief. On a collective level, this need is served by the National Enquirer. Baudelaire on creditors and procrastination as voluptuous agents of Satan is always a satisfactory read. It used to be that you had to have access to the diaries and personal effects of artists to get the dirt about them. Today, it is volunteered openly and even constitutes much of the content of the work itself. While I used to feel lousy about looking for the character flaws in my aesthetic idols to bring them down to my level, now I can feel lousy about people who have been clever enough to make lucrative careers out of being losers in the art world and in general. Now, the second piece that I want to read is from the Art Forum Diaries. This is Out of Seasons from July of 2016. It's a piece on the closing of the Four Seasons restaurant and the selling off of all of the service. So I'll just read this last paragraph that gets me every time. We had made our way into the grill room where tableware tagged by Wright was displayed in vitrines along the wall. The elegant chain metal curtains gently shuttering up floor-to-ceiling windows, the spiky Mad Men-esque Richard Lippold stalactites menaced over the bar. It was poignant. Another timeless icon of NYC glamour, soon to be erased by greedy developers marketing buzz. Well, as Yeats put it, all things fall and are built again, and those that build them again are gay. Sorry to see this stunning space go. The irony wasn't lost on me. Perhaps the most fitting tribute to a modern masterpiece is to obliterate history and bring in the new. Modernism ain't for wimps. Thank you.
Okay, just one more if you could stand it, although I'd rather leave people wanting more. Okay, this is a piece called Strange Bedfellows. Thanks. And it was originally a talk at the New Museum from Book Forum in 2013. Art collecting is perhaps the most esteemed form of shopping in our culture today. My whole thing with the Art Forum Diaries is to put the art in context, not to ignore aesthetics, but to see it amidst the whole crazy caravan that supports it. If I could just own a little bit of my tiny corner of the world, is that too much to ask? In an age where journalism is confused with stenography to power, this anecdote might seem inappropriate, and that's why I'm sharing. I had a disgusting little art world adventure when I agreed to cover a collector's open house, a VIP event for the Armory Show, when big art buyers open their homes to show their stash to fellow accumulators. These people buy art the way Imelda Marcos snapped up shoes. Who could resist gawking? The collector's open house is a denatured social situation. You're invited to see the art, but what's really on display is the buying power of the world's most meritorious, as Veblen would put it, consumers. It was a text-based collection. At a super fancy pad across the street from the Met, I Googled the name. A couple of Wall Streeters grinned back from the New York Social Diary. I got a message the night before and my heart sank. No shoes, please. Arg! How not glam to pat around their swanky pad in my hose. There's simply no way to work a winter look around no shoes. Nevertheless, having dedicated my life to truth and beauty, I showed up, buoyed, as usual, by fine ideas. A phalanx of doormen accosted me, their eye contact half cordial, half scanning me for criminal intent. I was guilty of entering the building while not being rich. Ushered toward the rack near the paneled elevator, I was required to surrender my coat and my purse in the lobby. Like in the Rocky Horror Show, when Dr. Frankenfurter takes their coats, then all their clothes, and leaves Brad and Janet shivering in their underwear. I was a hostage to PASAG hospitality. I could carry my pad and pen, but where to put the coat check thingy without any pockets? The little stub was a concern. I was miserable. I already felt suspect. What would be next? A woman with a blonde bob and a clipboard told me someone would escort me up the elevator in a blindfold, and I would remove my shoes before entering the apartment. May I ask why? A fresh purse amputee, I was in shock I had to relinquish a body part I never let go of in public. She has really nice carpets, you'll see. They're white and super comfy. She shamelessly tried to sell it. Upstairs, I dutifully removed my boots, complicit in my sartorial castration. I felt dowdy, desexualized, and short in my skirt and tights. I entered the living room with the swagger of a garden gnome. Hubby was there, about 20 years older than the wife, or looked it. So what do you think? He towered over me like a physical reminder of my finances. The place exuded power and privilege, all white glass mirror, primo real estate, and text-based art. The corner living room was radiant in the light, the palpable chi of boku bucks, with the aforementioned super comfy white carpets, a fireplace shimmering in pebbled mirror, a big glass coffee table displayed books of all the artists in the collection, I was told, a fluffy bench covered in Mongolian lamb and oodles of text-based art. The place was totally pimped out in reified language. I'm acclimating. There's a lot to take in. To be honest, I'm a bit weirded out to be in a social situation without my shoes. Tell me about it, he commiserated. I'm starting a petition. He seemed like the kind of affable, filthy old rich wasp who'd be easy to chat with over some gin and tonics. Apparently it's her thing, the no shoes. At the Strindberg Museum in Stockholm, I blurted to the hostess, who hovered nervously, "They give you booties to put over your shoes." "That's clean," she fielded my comment briskly, "but it doesn't protect surfaces from women's heels." The art accumulator of the hour was a tall, skinny blonde with a shiny, Botox, long face, regulation straight blonde hair, a hideous overblouse and a bold graphic with a dental collar, and shiny black leggings. She too dwarfed me. I couldn't help but notice she'd benefit negligibly from heels. We were a dumb show of Gilded Age income inequality, where the entitled literally enforce an uneven playing field. I was ready to look at some art. She seemed jittery, eager to be validated as a collector, but perhaps anguished to have her home invaded by strangers' germs, or worse. There was a genericness to her all-white and glass sanctum, like she dropped a ton of money a few years ago binge shopping big names, Richard Prince, Ed Ruscha, John Waters, etc., an art market fashion victim. I wondered if her obsession with cleanliness and germs masked some kind of Lady Macbeth situation, like she could never be clean enough. A quick Google of her hedge fund showed a colleague busted for misadvising Polaroid to rake in more fees while they were going bankrupt, screwing shareholders and draining the workers' pension fund, picking the carcass clean. Noted. She pointed at a new piece near a fabulous view of 82nd Street, a distorted mirror with the etched text, "You are limitless." "It's nice to see what people do with their terraces," commented someone nearby. "I buy what I love," said the culture vulture, or just vulture. "I like words. You only have a certain amount of disposable money to buy art with, so I had to focus on what I liked most." I thought it odd I didn't notice one book in the entire apartment, except for a ready-made by Ed Ruscha. I just bought it yesterday in a lucite case with the letter S painted on the worn cover. Humbled by the germ freak's obvious wealth and so-called hospitality, Armory VIP ticket holders wandered about in their socks, most of a certain age. "Oh, how beautiful, thank you," they said reverently. Everyone looked a bit abashed. One bewildered guest even thanked me. A student from the Sotheby's program stood at the door with a clipboard on shoe removal patrol. She gushed over the opportunity to see the collection, a lackey in training. One art appreciator in a pony skin newsboy cap whipped out a pair of white satin ballet slippers and deftly covered her stockinged feet. "I always travel with them," she said, "all business, there to gawk and not to chat." A less happy camper reminded me of Shelley Winters as she struggled to pry off her pumps. "They kept my shoehorn. Anyone have a shoehorn?" she asked helplessly. The stepdaughter of the house offered to be of help discussing the art. She was finishing her MA in art history at Columbia and chirped she was, quote, really stressed out about writing papers. Turned out she went to Yale undergrad. I taught there and I felt like the help here. Her boyfriend was also there to keep an eye on things. A youngish fuddy-duddy, like a less sympathetic Tom Bosley, works at a new gallery on the Upper East Side, repping the blue chip dead. It's not about selling, he said, but where it's going, legacy stuff. He was at Gladstone, and before that he was an artist assistant. You had a studio background, I was intrigued? Yes, but I got more interested in the business and intellectual end. Now I'm all business. I hate artists. Artists are the worst. Are you a collector? I approached one well-preserved lady peering at a piece. Yes, Chicago and Miami, she scurried away. Are you a collector? I asked an older gentleman in a pinstripe suit, black socks. Yes, he beamed, exposing a missing canine tooth. If I see something I love, I must have it. Under the word pieces were careful installations of personal photos in clear frames. In one, I spotted Leslie Stahl and a collection of Steuben glass animals. I really wondered if the hostess had OCD or worse and was freaking out about invaders in her space. She must have really wanted to be validated as a collector. Paul Morris, who runs the Armory, breezed in, looking, as always, like $1 million. The first year we did open houses, he said, 5 collectors said yes, 5 said no. Then the next time, all these people called up, what's the matter, I'm not good enough to be asked? Tom Wolfe would have relished the anxious collector in her shiny black leggings, reading aloud to a bunch of VIP ticket holders from a piece on her dining room wall that snaked around the page in ribbon-like sections. The thing about money is that it communicates perfectly clearly in that it makes things grow, not that it's necessarily a good thing, or even usually. I lurked there for an hour trying to get a piece while feeling stumpy. I was about to leave and stayed to watch her pose for our photographer. Tom Bosley assisting, they perched her on the Mongolian lamp-covered settee in the text art-filled living room. She nervously positioned herself, eyed me watching, and suddenly blurted out, oh, by the way, you can't mention the no shoes thing. There was a whole situation with Gawker. I'm with the hedge fund, and we have to be careful what's online. She said she told the Armory people, but I never received that message. If I had, I never would have shown up. What a control freak. I instantly knew I couldn't do the piece. What was the point of being a lady and suffering through this? Fine, I said, careful not to escalate anything. I'm not disputing anything you say. You won't be upset with the piece because I'm not going to file it, I told her. I can't believe Art Forum thinks shoes are more important than the art. She was aghast. I can't isolate the art from the context. That's the whole point of writing about collections, the mise en scène. I'm here to cover the whole open house situation. No Shoes was part of that. It's about culture, I eyed Tom Bosley. She chased me to the elevator, waving her iPhone with the email she sent. I sent it at 3:44. I was careful to stay calm while she waved her thing at me. I'm not assigning blame, but someone must have dropped the ball. I should have been informed about your condition earlier. Let's leave it at that. I scooted in. She was totally stunned she couldn't have her cake, no shoes, and eat it, get vanity coverage with no mention of no shoes obnoxiousness, like she had hired me to bake her cake. I said, we'll have to agree to disagree, and stayed cordial. Thanks for opening your home. I'm sure you'll get the coverage you want sometime, but not today. I was a lady with boundaries. Ugh. The entitled consumer assumed she was entitled to flattering coverage because the writer's point of view would be the same as the market's. She really thought she could control my text the way she demanded I hand over my purse and shoes. I like words, too. On my way out of the crazy posh building, the Money Fortress, I noticed an infirm, distinguished-looking geezer getting wheeled out to a waiting town car, probably a decrepit white-collar criminal. I looked at a building like this, and I think it's filled with crooks, shysters, and predators, financial vampires extracting rent from the real economy and adding nothing of any value whatsoever. You know, like hollowing at the middle class, committing systemic fraud with impunity, exploiting the planet. What was I even doing there? Art makes strange bedfellows.